more, so I think that's going to be a plus here. And again, the new features that we put in here, as well as part of more functionality, is that conformal coding. The fact that the keypad is a smart keypad. It's remotely mountable. It means NEMA 4, and what I didn't tell you before is you can mount it up to 66 feet or 20 meters away from the drive, and it'll work. And the nice thing about this keypad also, the connectors are like the phone jack type connectors, so it's a lot easier to get a cable that you can actually build yourself, or than with the prior family, which had one of those special adapter cable connectors, so you needed to go back to the parent company to get any of your connections. Now you can actually come up with your own, you can do your own custom thing in the field. I mentioned before that the I/O terminals are removable for easier wiring and configuration. Also, we have some option cards on the drive, so if you need expanded I/O capabilities, for example, or if you did find that the motor had an encoder and somebody wanted to bring that encoder back into the drive for her, here's an option card to bring the signal in. But if you wanted to use more than one of them, then you couldn't do that in the past. You had to prioritize. Well, this one, there's 3 spaces for up to 3 different option cards that can be accommodated. So you can have an expanded analog input, you can have an expanded digital output, which will do a number of relay output offerings. So you can have a total of 6 relay outputs coming out of this drive with that card. But you can do all that without having to prioritize over one or the other. So these are some of the examples where we say yes now, where we used to say, well, not exactly or not quite. The EQ7, again, it's in our catalog. If you had one of our old catalogs, you probably saw these 2 products, the EQ5 and the 7200 GS. Those are being disconnected and phased out. So we're going from 2 different product lines to one, so we're for the same functionality. So we're simplifying things for everyone. And again, these are the markets that we look at. I think the most important one, or the closest one in relationship to you, would be wastewater applications or any sort of water treatment, water industries. But we do some other things in some of the industrial applications, again, that we're trying to expand and make this a drive for everyone, or make it fit for a lot more people's applications.
Have you had any experience putting them in units that serve pools, in particular?
Swimming pools?
Yeah.
Typically, no, we haven't done that because they usually standardize on something smaller like a micro drive for that, because those are like 1 or 2 horsepower. And I was like, one of the things, this drive does a lot, but the smallest horsepower is kind of like this wide and this big. So to say it's compact is something we cannot claim for the EQ7.
One of the things that makes me wonder about on that is because you're talking about your conformal coding. And that's one of the things I've seen that I know where there's one and it's got a special cabinet around it and everything else.
Oh, because of the chlorine and the chloride in the air.
Yeah.
Now, that's a good point. And actually, having said that, then maybe in that case, because of the size, there is no relative disadvantage of going to that over a micro drive, because if you have to enclose the thing anyway, you don't have to enclose this. I'd say you're at an advantage with this.
Yeah, I mean, even outside the unit when it's supposedly sealed and everything, it's just a lot of corrosion and it just really eats up the silver. Just like I did work once in a place that did magnet cast it. Same thing, it would eat the silver out of braze over time.
Okay. Oh, that's a good point, a good consideration. Yeah, thank you. We've had, we're actually finding we're getting some success with we're doing some pumps and we're doing some, but it's more like industrial pumping in some of our higher horsepower units. So we're starting to see these show up in places like people call from North Dakota because they've got one of these and it's out in that new oil field that they're trying to drill. And finding out pumps and compressors out there. So we're starting to see the product take off. So we're pretty excited about that. And one of the things I do want to mention is that in addition to just providing this drive, we can also take this drive and package it. So if you have the bypass or if you have the need to stick it outdoors or on a rooftop, we can provide the unit enclosed with integrated in a package NEMA 3R, NEMA 4, NEMA 12. We'll put a disconnect on, we'll put a fuse disconnect or a circuit breaker on it. If they have special filtering requirements, we can stick a line reactor or something higher level like a matrix filter. We have the capabilities to do those type of value added things as well. We can have those built to order.
How does it deal with a simple brown down on one leg or even single phase?
You do have the ability to check either single, if you want to prevent single phase operation, you have the ability to flag that as single, as lost phase. So on the output, obviously, it's going to trip out and trigger on the input. But if you have an application where you've only got single phase power coming in, this drive is good for that because let's say it's 230 volt single phase, all the ratings all the way up through the 150 horsepower there, we have an alternate rating for single phase input. So if you have a 30 horsepower motor, then you would put either a 60 or 75 horsepower drive on. But we've done those applications before, so yes, we can accommodate those. On this drive, in fact, that's one of the places where we expect to see a little bit of use of the drive. We know that people have single phase and they're trying to do like, typically it's what, 10, 15, 20 horsepower motor top. But if somebody had a 50 horsepower, 230 volt single phase, or even 460 volt, we can do single phase 460. And we have in that brochure right there, we have all the ratings for 460 volts and 230 volt single phase across the whole range. So if you ever have a 400 horsepower motor 460 and you only have single phase 460 coming in, you can use our 1000 horsepower EQ7 and run.
I've run
That's a pretty out there example. Obviously.
Yeah, I've run into some situations where it was actually single phase coming in due to a fall, and we stayed in operation until it got up about 50 hertz, and then it popped my DC bus and
and what happens there is, since you've only got one conductor doing the work of three,
right,
you're starting to draw that, and you might trip out the breaker or the fuse on that phase coming in because you're overworking it. But more often than not, what's going to happen is that's going to come in across the diode. It's going to turn to DC, but now instead of 3 phases DC, you've got 1 phase. So your DC section is going to look more. It's going to have a lot more ripple in it. And when you try to output 3 phases out of that, you got the ripple. Then your motor's going to have to draw more current than the drive can deliver to operate, and so you eventually trip out on an overload.
Yeah, that's what happened with me.
Yeah.
And in that case, it had actually blown a semiconductor fuse up inside the drive.
Ooh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Well, and the other of course, the other downside of that is 3 phases, 3 diodes, but if one's not operating, the other 2 are doing more work too.
Right.
So it could lead to premature failure of one of those units if it's being over-exercised. But hopefully there's safeguards and things in place to avoid that.
And you can do skip frequencies on the drive?
Absolutely, 3 skip frequencies, and you got a range on that. And
you can, what was the other thing I was thinking?
it does, it has thermal management on it, so that if right at the outputs, transistors, if it's getting warm, if it's starting to get too hot, it'll automatically start folding back on the carrier frequency to hopefully maintain and keep the temperature low.
Yeah. What about, can you adjust the, what do they call it, the sampling rate in the case of, say you've got an older existing motor and you get a lot of noise out of the motor,